In this edition of the Point and Click podcast, we'll talk artificial intelligence in the creative world with tech columnist Nancy Roberts. That's next. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mark Yapchak, and I'm thrilled to bring you this podcast. Now, in the early days of the World Wide Web and the dawn of personal computing, I produced a computer call-in show for Time Warner Cable. With this podcast, I hope to bring you interesting topics, engaging guests, and take the mystery out of consumer technology and personal computers. Now, you can connect with us many ways. We're on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And of course, listen to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Now, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss our latest episodes. Today, I'm thrilled to have my dear friend and colleague Nancy Roberts with me. Nancy co-produced and hosts our television show back in the day. Beyond her television experience, Nancy's also a tech columnist for Table Hopping and runs her own tech blog. And you can find that tech blog at nancytechblog.blogspot.com. And that was a mouthful to get through, Nancy, but welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. How have you been?
Thank you, Mark. Good to see you.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit.
See you this time because we've tested it and we were,
Yeah, as I've come to find out, the technology is why we had so many people working on the TV show back in the day. I only had to show up and direct. I had engineers, audio people, Chiron people. I didn't have to do hardly any of the technical side. But since the show went off the air, you've been writing a tech blog for Table Hopping.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about that, and also tell me a little bit about your tech blog and how that got all started.
Well, the two kind of mirror one another, and they just, because I had done the show, wanted a column, monthly column, just whatever's happening in technology. And it's kind of funny because I look back at the stories over the years and it goes way, way back. And it seems like we just keep reinventing the wheel. We give ourselves a new challenge, and it always boils down to the same problems, which is, how do I use this? How do I become adept with it? And then they change the rules. And it's always people versus technology.
I have to wonder, do you still get stopped by people out and I know you used to tell stories on the show about how you'd be out at CompUSA or Best Buy and somebody would walk up to you and go, "Hey, aren't you the person from that computer show I'm looking for?" And then like pull you by your shirt sleeve to wherever it was they were shopping. "Can you tell me which one of these to buy?" And I mean, you still get some of that, or has that kind of faded away?
Yeah, although certainly not as much as I used to. But the funniest one was I was traveling overseas and someone at a cafe shouts across the room, "That's Nancy Roberts."
Oh my God.
What? And it was another tourist, of course. But it was kind of funny because we ended up in the same place at the same time. But
where was this now? I missed the first part.
It was in Scotland.
In Scotland,
my sister and I had gone, and so we're sitting in a little restaurant, and
Scotland of all places.
Somebody was there touring. It's a very popular tourist destination.
Unbelievable. Well, you do the tech blog too. Now, how did that come about? Did that kind of come as an offshoot of your table hopping writing?
Well, actually, it was just the convenience. Mm-hmm. I started keeping a blog there, and it's actually not supported really anymore. But I just left my blogs there and keep updating them because it's convenient, and they let it go, but they're not doing any innovation or anything with it. But they're obviously still available. But it was for the ease of writing, and I was going to be writing the article. So I thought, well, this way I can write it wherever I am, and I have a record of them, and I can look back and see what I did before. And did I write something about this before? How long ago? What did I say? How much has it changed? And it's all right there. So awesome. I like easy.
I know, I've come to the realization over the years that, somebody used to always tell me all the time, work smarter, not harder. If you can just save yourself a step or two somewhere in the process, you still get the information out and you're not working twice as hard to do it. So yeah, that's a great idea. Now you have had, I don't know if many people know this, at least not people that maybe have watched the TV show, but you worked a little bit in the marketing world. I know you worked in one of the bigger agencies in Syracuse, and I'm not going to say the name, but you did quite a number of years doing that. Kind of the theme of the show today was to try to kind of talk a little bit about how AI and artificial intelligence is kind of working its way into the marketing world, into the creative world, probably would be a better way to put it. What has your experience with that been? And do you feel that these services that you see out there, some of the ones that you had mentioned to me in your note, do you think that they're going to work their way into marketing at some point, or do you think they're still not ready for prime time?
The biggest problem that I see with it thus far, although I don't anticipate it's going to stay that way for long, is it's not reliable
Mm-hmm.
from time to time to time. And obviously, for marketing campaigns, you've got to have through lines, you've got to have some consistency while you run that particular campaign. And so it has to look similar, feel similar, sound similar. And right now, at least my experience, and someone could correct me on this, but when I've tried to get artwork out of it, it's good. Don't mistake me. It
Mm-hmm.
looks great in many cases. But if you try to replicate the thing you've done before and make a slight change to it, it's difficult to get that done. They're actually offering courses and prompts now
Mm-hmm.
because people need to learn how to create a prompt that will give them the output that they are hoping for. So
Yeah,
you've got a picture in your mind of what you think you want,
yeah,
and it throws you back something.
yeah,
But then if you do it again, it might give you something
yeah.
significantly different enough that
The part of it
that's not
that
going to work
really
for.
kind of gets me is, and at least the reading I've done on AI, is that a lot of it is generated by whatever content has been supplied to it. So if you're
Mhm.
talking about an engine that has been fed a certain bit of, metadata or information, it could be skewed one way or the other. I know there was a big story, and I know you're aware of this with, I don't know if it was the Google Gemini engine. It was called BART at the time when they were
Mhm.
testing it. They were feeding it information, and I think some of the stuff came back, and it was kind of racially skewed one way or the other. And I think that was a big issue. Where's the information coming from? Who's
Yeah.
curating it?
Yeah, it's I actually tried it out when I first tried Bard, and I
Hmm.
put the same prompt in,
Hmm.
and I only changed a word so that it was politically one way or the other.
Hmm.
And for one answer, I think I told you this, I got back this glowing description of all the wonders of this political position. And then the other one, it just said, I can't answer you. I am an AI. And I thought, that's kind of strange.
Yeah.
But I also tried recently just running through the images, and I asked it for someone had written a column on this, and I wanted to see if it held up. And it was a mother and child of one description, and it came back with a mix,
Mm.
and then a mother and child of the other description, and it came back with what you'd asked for. And it
Wow.
was, again, you kind of like, I don't know. I don't know why or what the rationale is, what they're trying to accomplish, or nothing at all, just what it's seeing in this digital world out there that
Hmm.
obviously we can't see the
Mm.
way an artificial intelligence or a search engine would.
Right.
I remember when we first started using Google on the show,
Hmm.
and the brains would be talking and I'd be typing in the command. And in those days, you could have not, or,
Hmm.
and you could give it these little commands that were pretty specific. And it would come back with the best results after time after time. And I was always raving about this and saying what a great search engine it was.
Hmm.
And I had a friend who said, it's the evil empire. And I said, no, no, it's not.
Well,
Maybe he's right.
people don't, I don't think we anticipated back in the 90s and the 2000s, early 2000s. We're talking almost a quarter of a century now, believe it or not. And I am amazed. I started watching back some of the older shows. I thought maybe I could extract maybe a scene or a segment out of the show, play it on the podcast, and then maybe talk about how things have changed. And
Hmm.
I'm still kind of gauging whether that's going to be relevant to anybody today. Something my daughter had talked to me about the other day was she goes, Dad, people are really fascinated with stuff from the past. They're really nostalgic for the things of maybe 10 or 20 years ago. I mean, that's why vinyl records are back in
Yeah.
fashion. It's not because the technology is any better than what we have today. It's because of the nostalgia of having a vinyl record and say, wow, this is neat. I have an album.
Yeah.
But I wonder if, when we thought about Google back in the day and how convenient it was to use it and how we explained it to our viewers, if there was any expectation that down the line it would become influenced by artificial intelligence and having those elements as part of it. I don't know if you've used it a lot recently, but they're really pushing the AI element
Oh, yeah.
Google. So when you do a
Mhm.
search, you're getting a little AI window at the top of the page. You're getting below it. You're getting. Do you want to revise that or refine that
Mhm.
question to kind of hone in
Well,
on what you're looking for?
if you think about it, we've been really getting this in in a way for a long, long time.
Mm,
So if you write a document in Word, you get spelling corrections, you get grammatical suggestions, and really what that is AI.
mm,
And some people rely on it now for
hmm.
spelling. They don't even try to spell. They just assume it'll be spell corrected. And I
Yeah.
could just go through and accept these spelling changes. And I think that's been going on. Obviously, in a way, a search engine is an artificial intelligence. It's going out and hunting all these different sources that use a similar phrase
Hmm.
and feed it back to you in ranked order.
Hmm.
And of course, advertising came in and started playing a role
Well,
in that as well.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
we were getting this universe as seen by a search engine, which was
Hmm.
simply saying, I had 8 million of those and
Hmm.
2 million of those and only 50,000 of those. So I'll put them like this and give
Hmm.
them back to you. And it didn't necessarily mean what we were thinking it meant, because it just could have been it was popular topic or
Hmm.
was repeated over and over and over. And again, people started doing that as soon as they figured it out. They're like, okay, throw the bots in there and have them
Hmm.
use that term 8 gazillion times.
Well,
Up
you
the
work
rankings, right?
the
Remember when they would
rankings.
tell you couldn't spam the site with all the invisible words repeated over and over and over?
Right. Yeah, there was
Yep.
I had a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, was working at an ad agency, and he told me about. I didn't even realize. I looked into search engine optimization a little bit,
Hmm.
and I didn't even realize that some web page designers actually put invisible text,
Yeah.
microscopic invisible
Over
text
and over and
into the
over
page.
again.
Yeah, whatever
Yep.
they want to hit as far as a demographic, terms, words, whatever,
Yep.
to generate a response on the search engine
Yeah.
bots to get them to
But it
acknowledge
only
it.
worked for a nanosecond because
Yeah,
it was
they got
too
smart.
obvious,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
It just okay, if you use the word 500,000 times on a single page, there's something wrong with that.
yeah, yeah. It doesn't make sense. But when you're using, I'm going to bring it back around to creative a little bit because I think that's what intrigues me the most. With AI, like we talked about earlier, it's what you put into it that really influences it. How much do you feel AI is going to either maybe not replace, but support creative design? I know last summer there was the strike. The writers for Hollywood were on
Mhm.
strike. I think they were really concerned about being replaced. If a producer could hire a company with an AI engine that could write scripts, would they really even need to hire human script writers anymore? I don't think we're there yet. I think there's a lot of issues, as you mentioned earlier, with what kind of responses you're getting. I think you still need human intervention, human editing and guidance. But how much do you think AI will change the way people write and create?
Well,
That's a
if you
big
think
question.
about it, take photography.
Hmm.
When it started, it was expensive, difficult. You had to know a lot. You had to be very
Hmm.
patient. You
Hmm.
developed your own stuff. And even when I started taking photos, and it was still film, I had to invest a lot. I had to spend a lot of time.
Hmm.
We had to bracket our photos. So every shot we took, we do it one f stop, another f stop, with this lighting, with that lighting, zoom in, zoom out. But, and zoom was,
Crank.
it wasn't a button.
Right,
Um,
right.
so, I mean, I think all technologies, all of these things, when imagery has been changing and changing and changing. And photography, if you remember,
Hmm.
launched the abstract art
Oh, right, right.
because you had to paint that and you had to paint it realistically, or you drew it and drew it realistically because you wanted a representation of
Hmm.
this thing that you saw that was beautiful. And
Hmm.
then when photos became ubiquitous, I could take a picture of this. So I
Hmm.
didn't need to learn my brushstrokes or learn to represent. I could take a photo and I could play with the photo and, in the darkroom, or even later with Photoshop.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we don't know yet
Mm-hmm.
exactly how this all will play out, because, as I said, people are having to learn how to do prompts. So
Right.
perhaps this will just open a door to a whole new type of creative thinking
Right.
that we're not even tuned into 100% yet. Because in the final analysis, it's not artificial intelligence really that's looking at these things, it's
Mm-hmm.
us, and
That's true.
determining how and where we're going to use them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I mean, obviously, fire was both good and evil. You could warm your food and warm yourself, but you could also burn things down.
Burn your cabin down. Now
Yeah.
you had mentioned to me a few services that you had dabbled in. I think one of them was NightCafe,
Mhm.
Imagine Art, and MidJourney, I think was the other one. I tried. I worked on one on Imagine Art, and I think I talked to you about this during our chat earlier. Um, I plugged in. I wanted to see Alice in Wonderland, but I wanted to see Alice instead of Wonderland, Alice in a dystopian world. And it was a fairly good rendering. It was her. She was more steampunk than the Alice we remember with the flowing blue dress and whatever the original artwork was for that story. But it was pretty good. I think it surprised me. But then I started thinking about it. Well, it could have pulled any image of any woman. It could have pulled any image of any dystopian backdrop. It just
Mhm.
married the two together and spit it out and said, "Here's your Allison, dystopian world." Is that acceptable? I mean, how does that influence art? I mean, if you think about, I know my daughter. Another conversation I had with her, she was really concerned because she's a graphic designer, and she said,
Mhm.
"Dad, people's art is being used in these AI engines to
Yeah.
source material to composite new art." She says, "If I draw something and I put it on the web, is my art going to become part of somebody else's creation because it was on the web and the AI doesn't recognize, copyright or intellectual property rights? It just pulls that information and composites it." I mean, what do you think in the creative world, in advertising, in anything really? Do the creators, do the people that are actually doing the work, do they deserve some sort of recognition or protection?
Well, again, I'll use an example of 20 years ago. If I used a photograph on a website or in a piece of work it was the intellectual property of someone, they
Hmm.
were running bots all the time on the web looking for an image that matched their imagery, their library of stuff, and they'd come after you. Oh, and
Mm.
remember the music?
Oh
You
yeah,
could
Napster.
not use
Yeah,
music if you
yeah,
used more than 30 seconds of a clip, or
right.
it
ASCAP.
just for demonstration purposes. And they would come after you and they would sue you. And then they started doing the direct connect. So
Mm.
they started the file sharing devices where you
Hmm.
you could share your library of music with your friends using an
Wow.
online application. I think that, I'm trying to think how many years ago, but it's to the point now where if I use a photo for some purpose, odds
Mm.
are nobody is that. It's just when you have 10 instances of it worldwide,
Hmm.
100 instances of it, a billion.
Mm.
Now, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And it's just, is it ubiquitous? I don't think we're in any immediate danger from
Mm.
original artwork.
Mm.
Yes, couldn't someone steal it? What are they going to
Hmm.
do with it?
Hmm.
And
That's true. That's true.
what's the payoff ultimately? Is once upon a time, it was a big deal to get a photo or a painting, and so being able to steal it, and there has been theft of artwork
Mm.
going back to Michelangelo, Da Vinci, go
Mm.
back further, and people would copy
Mm.
or literally steal and paint over. We were
Oh wow.
watching something the other night, and someone says to me, "Why would you paint over a painting?" And I said,
It was less expensive. You didn't have to buy the
well, it
canvas.
was the
Yeah.
canvas, or they
Yeah.
painted it in such a way that it could be stripped off and
Hmm.
you could walk out with a cheap painting, but actually have a very
Wow.
expensive painting.
Wow.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
what was I was thinking about a story I'd seen on the internet. It was pretty viral a couple weeks back, about and I think this story really kind of uh focuses in on the dangers of, trusting AI to do anything for you without any kind of supervision or oversight. I know you've heard the story about the gentleman in Glasgow, Scotland. As a matter of fact, he
Yeah.
entrepreneur.
Yeah.
He calls himself a wordsmith, which sounds like a thing that AI would say if it was writing my bio. It would choose a word like that. And he wrote, apparently he wrote 17 novels that he published on Amazon. Don't know how. I mean, with AI, yeah, he could do that. But he created an event that he used AI to create promotional materials for, and it was based on Willy Wonka, the story that we're all familiar with and everybody knows. Unfortunately, the reality of the event didn't live up to the promotion that he created on AI. So my question is, there is a danger that AI could be trusted to do things and without proper oversight could do things, horribly wrong. But I think this was more than AI. I think this was just a charlatan trying to rip people off, get people excited about an event that obviously didn't live up to the expectations. But can AI be used for bad things like that in a marketing sense or in a advertising sense?
Well, what I don't understand about that particular story, and I was kind of puzzling over this as I read it, why would the guy have thought that that pathetic attempt was worth putting up anyway? Because it had all these screens in it and
Yeah,
tables and even some actors in
it was
position
just
in different
poorly
places.
poorly
But
executed.
now there's when I was out in Texas recently, we went to a thing called Meow Wolf.
Hmm.
And it's this crazy immersive experience, and you go from room to room, and it's all painted different ways, and you're
Hmm.
in a garden or inside a flower, and it's
Wow.
absolutely amazing. And then another one was a Harry Potter experience where you walked through a park and you went from place to place to place in the Harry Potter world and actually kind of got into,
Wow.
there'd be owls in all the trees and they'd be hooting and the lights would come up and go down and there was music playing in the background. It was great. So you got things like that going on. And then you walk into this, which looks like a gymnasium with a bunch of curtains hanging in it.
I mean,
And it
it was
was
even,
just so
it was
pathetically lame.
pathetic. It was
Yeah.
bizarre. And I
Why
think,
would the people setting it up think?
yeah,
Because
that
it's
this
not
is,
like there wasn't a setup. They had to hang these
well,
things, and
he hired an agency. I don't know if I
yeah,
could believe the fact that they said it was a company called the Illuminati, which in and of itself is intriguing to me. Is what
it might make
exactly,
you worry.
what exactly is the mission of this company if they're not willing to, kind of quality control what they're putting out there? But one of the elements that really got a chuckle out, and Jessica and I were watching it, my daughter and I were watching, and we laughed. Um, it created a completely new character that didn't even exist in the Willy
Right.
Wonka ethos. It was called the Unknown, and I mean, it was this guy wearing what looked like a horrible scream mask from the Spirit of Halloween store,
Yeah.
in a black
Right.
gown. He jumps out. Apparently, the character was created by AI. He lives in the walls of the chocolate factory, and he came out, and you could literally hear the children screaming and crying in the
Oh, I
background.
remember when he steps out from behind a mirror, and
Yeah, it
and
was like,
so the kids are looking at themselves, and
okay.
suddenly there's this ghastly being.
And I'm thinking, I'm the guy playing this role, and I'm thinking, I know
Yeah.
kids, and this is not something a kid would find interesting. Maybe a teenager would have a laugh because they'll go to haunted hay rides and haunted houses. Not a little child. I mean, but
Yeah.
it kind of illustrates, I guess, the point I'm trying to make, that AI sounds intriguing. It sounds like technology that's going to revolutionize, and it will in some fashion.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we're at a point right now where it's going to supplant common sense and just basic quality control. I mean, there has to be some level of control. I don't think it's ready to be set off in the wild, and it's just going to create stuff, and you're just going to, sample it and take
Well,
what you
when
need.
we've got to worry is when they combine how advanced robotics have become,
Oh,
and
right.
then the AI, because we
Right.
keep saying, well, not to worry, not to worry. But if you have a robot who can actually do something physically, and then you've got the artificial intelligence aspect of it, it might be a problem, but I don't think it's going to happen in the next, well, I shouldn't even say that, because remember, life cycles for artificial
Oh, yeah.
intelligence are much more rapid than ours. So
Oh, man.
who knows? But this is the timing when you should think ahead, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
What could it do? And we've certainly had enough books predicting that we should be careful what we turn loose on the world. I mean, that was Mary Shelley's story.
Yeah, the
Don't create
Frankenstein.
life.
Yeah, the Frankenstein
Right.
story. No, you're absolutely right. And I think, I think it's amusing. I mean, these little anecdotal stories are going to come around, and people are going to see things like that and say, "Oh, see, that's just proof that you can't trust the technology." I mean, we were talking about that back. I think we did a show. I recall doing one about war driving, which was we had a company that goes out and just literally goes around and tries to help corporations and businesses lock down their Wi-Fi. And it was
Yeah.
amazing to me to see how people were so willing to trust the technology to protect them, and
Yeah.
yet they were out there in the wild with their Wi-Fi completely vulnerable to attack from outside. He showed us, he logged in to open Wi-Fi in companies. He
Yep.
said they're even leaving the passwords, the generic password, which was even more intriguing to me, that if they hired an IT guy to do this and he didn't have the thought to even change the basic password, then maybe it's time for a new IT guy, number one. But
Mhm.
to not check, I mean, you've got companies, I think there was even a bank, believe it or not, when we were
Mhm.
driving down Salina Street that had open Wi-Fi. And I'm thinking, oh boy. And that was an eye opener. So it told me back then that you don't really trust technology to do the work. It still requires human intervention,
Yeah.
so and in the AI world, I feel the same way. I think that, people are not going to be able to just trust it to do what it does. You have to supervise it. Yeah,
Yeah. The issue always comes up, like, you think about self-driving cars.
yeah, that
When
scares me.
you've been when you've been taught to drive a car, and that's how
Right,
you learn to drive a car, letting something else take over the controls would be frightening.
right.
But if you learned to drive that way, you wouldn't have the same nervousness about just
That's
sitting
true.
back and taking a nap while the car drives you to Buffalo
That's true.
or
That's
somewhere
true.
else.
It could get to that point at some point
Yeah.
where you're actually just you're a passenger now. But I think a lot of the companies are insisting that even though these cars can drive, I think Tesla's car does. I think there's a couple. I think Cadillac does too, where it will require you to have contact with the steering wheel at some point. It
Yeah.
has to know that there's a human in the car, because can you imagine if a parent? I don't know if a parent would ever do this, but can you imagine if somebody with lacking basic common sense would
Yeah.
say, "Well, I can't
Put your
take my
kids
kid
in
to
the
school
car.
today. I
Right.
can't take him to school, but I can send the car to the school with my kids in it, and I know it'll get there because it's self-driving." I'm thinking, are you really well ready and willing to let your children? I mean, what if the kid gets up in the car seat and
Yeah.
disengages it? I mean, you just can't trust technology to do all the thinking for you. You still have to think
Yeah.
and be involved in some
We
fashion,
hope
but
so anyway.
you hope. But yeah, so I'm really glad you could join me today. I believe it or
Yeah.
not, a half an hour has just come and gone,
Well,
and
great.
I think we could really we could tackle a lot of topics in the span of an hour. I think we're going to hopefully get up to that point. But I look forward to having you back on the show again in the future.
Absolutely.
And I just want to remind everybody that if you want to follow Nancy, she's writing on table hopping, and she also has her tech blog. I'll give it to you again. Hopefully I won't mess it up. It's nancytechblog.blogspot.com. I had to practice that a few times.
There you go.
But if you want to check out some of her material, but thank you, Nancy. I appreciate your time, and we'll talk
You're
to you
very
again
welcome,
soon.
Mark. Good to
Thank
talk to
you.
you.
Join the party. Hang out with us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Come say hi, share your thoughts, and be part of the conversation. Now, you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And don't forget, hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss an upcoming episode. Now, get ready to be tech savvy. Our next guest is legendary Al Fasold, former technology columnist for the Post-Standard in Syracuse. He'll be dropping knowledge bombs on you that you don't want to miss. We'll see you next time.